Okay, so my name is Brianna Reese, and I'm the Student Director of the Arlen Specter Center. Thank you everyone to come out today. It really means a lot to us. Today we're going to be talking about the election that is currently going on, and our host today is David Rogers. And I will turn it over to him.
Hi, my name is David Rogers. I'm an assistant professor of writing and rhetoric, and my research interests are actually in political rhetoric. My most recent article that I submitted for publication, fingers crossed, is an analysis of presidential campaign ads. Jane?
Hi, my name is Jane Stocker. I'm an alumni from Philly U as of May 2016. I study communications, and I'm a former student of David's. I think he knows I have a lot of opinions about this, so I was invited to come here today.
I'm Megan Sprance. I'm a third-year law and society major, and I just have a lot of opinions. So that's why I'm here.
I'm Eamon O'Neill. I'm a communications major. I have a couple of opinions.
I'm Colin, also a communications major.
My name is Emir Lucas. I'm a marketing major, mine in fashion merchandising. This is my third year, and I was very interested about the topic. So,
my name is Victoria Anthony. I'm a first-year law and society major.
I'm Evan Lane, I'm director of the Specter Center for Public Service, and I have absolutely no opinions, emotional or any kind, on this issue at all.
So I just kind of want to start this discussion with a framing device. So I think we've heard over and over and over that this is a strange election year, from reporters to political pundits to politicians to the public. And I want to kind of focus on what is interesting and strange and unique about it, and the kinds of definitions I want us to think about and perhaps refer to or ask questions about or engage in a conversation about are, one, political feelings and emotion, and the ways in which emotion, that's the naming of our feelings, shapes our choices, our decisions, especially our political behavior. I think we're seeing that played out in really, really interesting ways this year, although it always has. Politics has always been emotional. Politics has always been tied to people's sense of self and identity. Aristotle said famously that a man by nature is a political animal. So we're deeply entangled as we built communities with each other. We created political systems. And the other thing, which is also tied to emotion and political feeling, is political spectacle. And what I mean by that are thinking about the ways in which politicians especially construct political meaning through their various tools that are available to them, and how then the media either filters that or takes advantage of that or exacerbates that to such a point that it becomes increasingly impossible to identify what is quote-unquote true or truth. And I kind of just wanted to start with a general question, and anyone can kind of take it up. Have you had emotional responses to this particular election, and what have they been?
My emotional response stems incredibly deep in the way that Donald Trump has brought about his campaign and the way that he's addressed certain topics. Specifically, the disrespectful and dehumanizing way he speaks to Secretary Clinton. She has a title, she has experience, and he only ever calls her Hillary, like during debates. And that is a really, really strong way to disregard her position and what she's accomplished. And he consistently brings up her husband as like sort of like a backlash against her. And her husband's her own man, like whatever, like leave that be. And then he says that god-awful phrase, grab him by the pussy. And then Lane actually came and sat in on our law, women, and gender class the other day because we had a speaker. Dr. Bosch came in and she just spoke to us about bias, like our internal biases that we have and all this stuff. And we actually discussed this quote and how Billy Bush and Donald Trump sat on that bus and dehumanized this woman to a pair of legs and a pussy and nothing more than a sexual object, and then had the audacity to then get off that bus and feign interest in anything. It's like he gave her humanity back because he deemed it so. It's like he thinks that he has that ability. He has, like, when he, like, every time he interrupts her, it's wrong. And she interrupts him once last night and he goes, what a nasty woman. He low profiles her, like, just like brutally attacks this woman. And like, Hillary's no saint. I was a Bernie supporter, like, through and through. Still think about it.
Actually, let's transition then from there.
Yeah.
For other panelists, I think it's been pretty clear that also many people don't like Hillary.
No.
And find her unlikable. Have you had similar emotional responses to Hillary, and why? Because I think it's worth talking about. Because to some extent, I want to see this as an opportunity to have a balanced debate, looking at all opposing viewpoints. Because I think there's a reason why these candidates are constructed in the ways that they are, and I think it's important to discuss.
I think, for starters, have you guys seen like the commercial ad that Hillary made about Donald Trump? It's like a little girl looking in the mirror.
Yeah.
You know, I think when she brought that out, it kind of like threw me for a loop. Like, whoa, like she's really cutthroat too. You know what I mean? Like that was like he said most of those things, and she just like directed them to that. It's all to your daughters. You know, like kind of like getting to the woman's and the man's heart. Like, oh, I don't want this guy to be president because he hates my daughter. You know what I mean? So I think that right there and her background in politics, it kind of like shows you that basically she can be just as cutthroat as he can.
There is a long history of political campaign ads using what could be called mudslinging. I think one of the most famous is the Willie Horton ad that the first Bush campaign used, where they essentially turned an incident that happened in Boston and racialized it and used fear as a political device to persuade people not to vote for the other candidate. But that's not the only one. Nixon famously used the threat of the atomic bomb in the Daisy video. Now, I can later tell you where you can go watch these. There's a great website, the Living Room Candidate. But there is this history. So I'm not defending it, but there's a reason why it's legitimate, right?
I think the interesting question is why there's such emotion. And you said there always was emotion, but there was a time when people who were Republican and Democrats sit at the same table and actually talk, whether they're politicians or whether they are family members. It has got to this point. I have a friend who I went down this week in Ocean City, and you're watching this, you know who you are. And the moment I went in there, I said right away, because I know who he supports, I said, this will be a Trump-free weekend. We will not talk about him at all. I don't care. No discussion. Because I knew, this is a very close friend, I love him, that if we got into the discussion, it wouldn't be the policy arguments. It would be good versus evil. It would get into that, and maybe really lead possibly to the end of the friendship. And I think that's new in this particular campaign. It wasn't in, I didn't feel that in Obama versus, what the heck's his name? No. Romney. I didn't feel that same degree of emotion. People were for, against, and had opinions, but you could talk about it.
Yeah, but
why is it now you can't talk about it?
When I say emotion, though, like, our entire country is built on emotional response to this. Patriotism is defined as love for country. So I want to be clear, I'm not just, I think this is a kind of, I think you're right, a kind of unique expression that's different from other forms. But even in 1776, people were emotional about who was going to become the president. And that's what I mean. But there is definitely something going on. I have theories, but I want to, like, see what the students have to say.
Well, I wanted to say something. You know, I agree that Hillary Clinton is not a good candidate. I would, if I had a choice, a real choice, I would not be voting for her. But the problem I find is there's always been a rule book. No matter how nasty you get, there's a certain line you don't cross. And Donald Trump crossed that line a year ago. And, you know, and every week there seems to be something new that he's done that people say, well, that's going to get him completely out of it. But he keeps lowering the bar to the point that he's actually even questioning our identity as a representative Republican. I mean, he's going to say the election doesn't mean anything. He's good, you know, he basically wants to run the country as a dictator. He's ignoring what Congress is going to do.
And to be clear, because I want the room, I want all viewpoints to be respected. We can detach political ideas from people too, and I want to be clear, I think, like, you can have very conservative ideas, and that's good. Like, difference of opinion is what makes democracy great. But I think the performance and the embodiment of whatever its policies are, I'm unclear about, is at stake, and that's one of the problems, right?
I just want to have, it's good. It's gone beyond liberal and conservative. It's gone to the point of for a banana republic.
I agree. If I had any other choice, I would not be voting for Hillary Clinton, and I'm not gonna lie, the only reason I am is because Bernie Sanders gave her his endorsement, and like, I adore Bernie. He literally means everything to me. But I think that the patriotism, like that love that we have, Donald Trump has taken that and turned it into something grotesque. The majority of his like voters are uneducated white men, like heterosexual white men, and he's using their fears of Islamic terrorism. He's using their fears of like them becoming the minority, because heterosexual white men are becoming the minority. There's more women in this country than there are men, and like it's something that's becoming prevalent. And Professor Cheryl Brooks, who's like an amazing professor, she actually took Donald Trump's like his campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again," and it's actually "Make white men great again." That's what he wants to do. He doesn't give a crap about any other people. Am I allowed to say crap?
See what you want.
All right. He doesn't care.
I've never used the word.
He doesn't care about like this other people. So he's taken that love of country, and that's why I think it's more emotional than ever, because he's taken that patriotism and he's like deformed it, and he's turned it into this grotesque thing where he's telling his supporters to beat the living crap out of other supporters, and he will pay for their expenses. And Hillary's no better. Hillary is as corrupt as they come. I dislike her immensely, but she's better than him. And like,
That's a great campaign slogan.
yeah, I mean, America is literally in catch-22 right now. We're damned if we do, and we're damned if we don't, and we don't really have an option. We can like go with Trump and die, or we can like go with Hillary and just become more corrupt than we already are.
I don't know if I would. That's
Embellishment.
These absolute claims. I think let's try to not overgeneralize.
Yeah.
And our feelings about Hillary aside, like that's a conversation that we can have, but it's a longer conversation, right? Because I think that Hillary has been constructed for the past 30 years to such a degree through media that we no longer know what is actually who it is.
She doesn't admit to everything. She just kind of covers it all up.
Well, she's a good politician.
No, and I will say, in the debate, the first debate, when like Donald Trump immediately he attacked her with the emails, I think that she did like the best decision that she could possibly done, which is instead of trying to run from it like she has consistently done, she was just like, "Yep, I did it. It was a mistake. I apologize. Let's move on." But she should have done that months ago, and this wouldn't have been an issue for him to use against her.
Lovely, you want to?
I was going to say something about the emotional part, because I think that it's very emotional this year because a lot of people who weren't involved in politics before are getting into politics. I've never even looked at about politics. This is my first year voting, and I am involved in it because of what Donald Trump says. A lot of the things he says out of his mouth just should not be said. He's such a misogynistic, he's racist, and he doesn't care about basically anyone but himself. He has so much money, and he just walks around like he's the king of the world. And I feel like that's why it's so emotional, because people actually have to stand up for themselves now, especially minority groups. And so I think
you make a great point. I just want to go on what Megan said. I used to love looking at the flag, and I feel it's been taken from me. When I used to hear it in the Olympics, USA, USA, I was proud. I hear that now and I get physically ill. I mean, this has been taken, my love of my country has been bastardized by a fascist movement. And that really is something that I get very emotional about. I used to be proud when I look at the flag. Now I see it in marches, and it's scaring me.
Going back to, David's question of, has Hillary offended me in any way? I think that one way... I don't know.
What do you dislike?
What do I dislike
what
about her?
What emotions does she provoke?
I mean, during the primaries, I think that she definitely capitalized on the fact that she was a woman, and I think that she kind of, expected women to vote for her because she was a woman, and if you're a woman and you don't vote for her, then you don't have any pride of being a woman. You're not a feminist. You're not, whatever. And I think that really bothered me a lot during the primaries, because I was a Bernie supporter, and, seeing just the way that she talked about women and the way that she just expected women to vote for her, like that's wrong. I consider myself a feminist, and just because I voted for Bernie doesn't mean that I wouldn't love to see a female president. I mean, I would love to see a female president, but...
Sure. I'm going to keep pushing us, though, to historicize this a little bit, because I think that's important. I think one of the reactions to that is Hillary is coming out of a feminist you don't see,
Right.
that you don't belong to because there's been a certain kind of quote-unquote progress, depending on how you want to look at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where she's out of the like women's liberation movement that's informed her understanding of feminism. Not to say that other emerging forms haven't, but there is a history that I think is linked to that, and I'm not justifying it, but I'm trying to help explain perhaps, or provide a explanation. It's not the right one, it's just perhaps one.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, again, like Lane was referring to, and I don't want to monopolize, but I'm trying to like direct us into some places that I want to go. I don't think this phenomena just happened out of thin air. I think there's a longer history. And here's a question for you. What, if you had to identify one or two emotions that you think are incredibly persuasive and that have been used in this campaign by both candidates, what are they?
I would say detachment versus paranoia. On Donald Trump's side, a lot of his arguments really tap into a person's paranoia about the system, the political system. It's a connection to the media. The idea that the election could be rigged, the idea that the election was set up unfairly against Bernie, Donald Trump has brought up again and again. And then on Hillary's side, I think she goes more towards detachment. Like when she's asked about like why she was paid so much for speeches, she's just, well, that's what they offered. And she really kind of, it doesn't really tap into emotion. She taps into this like sophisticated sense that policy is important, and that like she's about the issues and not about like trying to appeal to one's emotions.
Okay. Does anyone, do you all agree with that? Because again, I do think there are, at the heart of this particular election cycle that has a history, there are two emotions that aren't competing. They actually work in concert together. That's incredibly persuasive, I think, as we see.
I think fear has been like the largest part of the campaign. Like Trump uses fear of like the white America kind of crumbling and everyone's afraid of Islamic people and terrorism, and then Clinton, you know, creates her entire campaign about using fear of him. So he's using fear to rally people, and then she's using fear to get people to vote for her in fear of him winning.
Right, anger too, like using that anger, that whether you guys agree that it's justified or not, based on some of his, at Hillary's deplorable 50% or whatever of his, the grievances, let's say, that some white men have, some white working class men who have grievances, and they are real. I guess my argument against that, though, would be like if you use, you know, sexist, misogynistic, racist rhetoric to like defend and support your grievances, that's not persuasive to me. But fear seems to be, and I think there's a longer history to the use of fear in politics, in particular.
I think like me.
No.
Yeah. I think he uses like anger. Really, I think Donald Trump uses anger incredibly well, especially how he has brought up Bernie Sanders in every single one of the debates. Because like Bernie supporters hate Hillary. They hate her a lot. They really dislike her. Like there was the Bernie supporters at the DNC that had the tape over their mouths and like they refused to. They was like no Bernie, no like it was like they was like were like diehard Bernie fans.
Bernie or bust.
Yeah, Bernie or bust. And like they like put duct tape all over their faces and like refused to speak, and like it was just like this like really big like movement. And like the more he brings up Bernie, the more he points out how Hillary really did screw him over to like the umpteenth degree. She hired the lady that had resigned because she like pushed Bernie out or whatever. Yeah, she hired her as like her campaign head or something like that.
That's
like
big mess.
yeah, but like Donald Trump is like. I think he's very clever when it comes to that, and I think he's very, very clever. And like he also uses the fact that he's a good businessman and that America needs to be run like a business. And like if you really like, and he thinks that he can make it more profitable. And like because he's so rich, you're almost inclined to believe that he could make America profitable again.
Mm-hmm. Dave, I was going to say there seems. Can I speak on the
yeah.
fringes of what else?
Yeah.
There's a very interesting that happens with regard to creating groups that are assigned blame. So it's minorities, or it's the wealthy versus the poor, or the poor ethnic groups. This reminded me of some of the stuff around Reagan and a few things around George Wallace when he was a candidate, a fringe candidate, no doubt, but still this sort of, it's the fear thing, but it's very, in some cases, narrowly targeted towards certain groups, and it's used as a tool to some of his followers feel better about themselves because they think, now we've got someone we can look down on who must be worse than we are. It's a really, really crafty way to
Sure, and
create divisiveness.
Absolutely, and I think why I wanted to talk about emotion, besides that it's my research, but that emotions are sticky, right? They like stick to us, and they collect people, they organize us. Like, to give you an example you probably experienced. You go into a classroom, you can feel when your professor's mad by his or her walking into the room, right? Like, you can feel the room changes. It's like, and everybody's like, oh, shit, something's about to go down. Like, seriously. Or when someone's excited or someone's, showing affection without expressing it. I think that these things exist and they circulate around us all the time. And that's important. And it's one of the ways, by creating this us versus them, is one of the ways that you can use a singular emotion in a very persuasive way. I would argue.
It's always someone else's fault.
John, but I just want to ask a question, because I don't think we got to the panel. I really would love to know what everyone's emotions are. Not saying I love this person, just to, without even saying who you support, just, or have you been uncomfortable by this election? I mean, has it caused you stress? That I think is an interesting question, and John wants to comment as well afterwards. But asking Vicky next, has this been stressful?
So like in the beginning, like when they first started, like I was like a Trump supporter. Like everything was Trump. Like I absolutely hate Hillary. Even to this day, I hate Hillary. But I definitely was a Trump supporter. But as I watch him more closely and as I follow the debates, I get really like I'm not voting for Trump anymore. Like he scares me. Like the things he's been saying lately, it just really puts me on edge, and then I'm like. The things he just said, it just makes me really nervous about what he's going to do when he's in the office. I'm scared for the country, no matter who gets in, but I'm becoming more and more scared if he comes in. But I'm kind of scared that Hillary disrespected Russia and Putin last night on national television. That kind of scared me a lot.
Yeah, I think that, you were John.
Well, I was going to say one thing is, I hate to compare Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump, but Bernie Sanders supporters are doing very much the same thing that Donald Trump is doing right now. They're saying that Hillary Clinton's winning the Democratic candidacy is illegitimate. We don't want to, the woman, I can't remember her name, the head of the DNC, fixed the election, all this kind of rigged. I mean, they're using almost the exact same language to say why we're not voting for Hillary. Whether Clinton's a good candidate or not, they're still using a lot of the same language. It was an illegitimate election. Bernie Sanders deserved to win. She's not legitimate. And then, Donald Trump is making the same claims before the election, obviously. But, and everybody's criticizing him. But why isn't anybody criticizing the Bernie Sanders supporters? Bernie Sanders lost by 3 million votes. It wasn't close. And I don't think the head of the DNC, who nobody here probably could name except for maybe a couple of the professors. Except for a couple of the professors, like I said. Nobody can name. I don't think she has enough influence to change 3 million votes. And again, but they're using the same argument. She fixed the election. Hillary fixed the election. They're using the exact same argument.
Well, I think that, one of the similarities between Trump and Bernie from the get-go is that both of them are pointing out what's wrong with the political system. And while yes, it does seem hurtful to the whole process that Bernie supporters are saying that, I think that, one of the biggest things I feel as a Bernie supporter is that the internet has really given people a place to point out and find out about how things are not as we perceive them. During the primaries, I saw a lot of things online of people, their registration being changed when they knew that they had, changed it to Democrat, and they knew that they wanted to vote for Bernie, so they went through that trouble. And, while, yes, maybe it didn't influence, how many votes was it, the 3 million votes, I think that it is worth looking into for, at some respect.
Sure, and I don't think y'all should be put on the defensive either. I think if one thing great came, and I liked Bernie a lot, but one thing that Bernie did that's great is got young people excited about politics.
it's Bernie supporters that are saying that it's illegitimate, and they also have more ground. There's more validity to what they're saying. Donald Trump's just saying it to say it because he's a coward and he's getting scared, so he wants to say something. When he refused to accept the outcome of the election last night, that was cowardice. He's a coward. He's scared and he's retracting into a shell like the turtle that he is with a lot of fake Jergens glow on. Like, it's what's happening. Kevin Pierre-Louis pointed out, he's a student here, he's in London right now, he said that he stayed up till 2 a.m. to watch a malevolent Cheeto sweat on stage for 90 minutes. Yeah, so it's just, I would say that Bernie Sanders have more, there's more validity that Bernie was screwed over, because it was just, there's 3 million votes, but there's still a legitimacy behind the fact that he could have done better if he was more accepted by the Democratic Party. But everyone just labeled him as a socialist, which he's not. He's a democratic socialist, which have fundamentally different views and ideologies. Super important. Don't label him a socialist. He's not a socialist. He's a democratic socialist. And
All right.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone in this room is.
I've been in the middle of or close in on the edges of politics in Philadelphia for over 45 years now. And I've been a registered Democrat, I've been a registered Republican, still not sure where I belong in terms of the Philadelphia politics. I've watched every debate. My wife accuses me of being a political junkie, and I guess to some degree she's correct about that. And what I'm listening to is very interesting. I hear a lot of the emotional ties to the 3 different candidates that we have talked about. I try to believe that I'm an issues-related voter. And I watch these debates and I listen to the platform planks that they're presenting, and I sort of laugh to myself and say, folks, the ones presenting the platform, you don't understand how the system works. The system is in my opinion, a corrupt system. Our governmental system, at all 3 levels, at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level. And the main problem is that we don't have, and this is my issue, term limits. And I was hoping that I would hear at some time in one of the debates, one of the candidates say, term limits are critical to be able to clean up the system. And
Donald Trump actually is asking donations.
in a very minor, he did, but in a very minor, it was not a very strong position. It's sort of, but because none of the stuff that Secretary Clinton has proposed, none of the stuff that Mr. Trump has proposed, you're not going to get it through Congress as long as the Congress is in the same kind of structure it has right now. Our founding fathers, I believe, now I'm very old, but I'm not old enough to have been there. I believe that they expected the people to stand for different elected offices. We're not going to take it as a full-time life occupation. And that's what we have now. You have people who, if you're right, what their occupation is or goal in life, it's to be an elected official for the rest of their lives. Well, that is a corrupting factor, in my opinion, to how our system should be working. We need fresh ideas. We need people coming in who are willing to give 4, 6, 8, 10 years of their lives to stand for office, as difficult as that is, get elected, but then get out of the way and let somebody else come in and take over. So I'm hoping that we're facing a very difficult election. I'm still not sure where I will be when I go in the booth on November, was it 9th or 8th or 9th? And that's a problem. But the problem is because I don't see either one of the 2 major candidates really addressing the underlying problems that our system has. And that's what I would like to see to start to happen.
Yeah, I would add before I move on too, I think part of the fiction been perpetuated both in television, film, and by presidents themselves is that the president is all-powerful and that the president can fix everything and that it's the president's job to be the economic functionary of the nation. That is all a bunch of hooey to some extent. Presidents do use and abuse their power through executive orders, and why they often don't get overturned is because that president comes in wants to use the executive orders, so you're not going to overturn the prior executive orders. So again, this idea that our civic duty is in that 4-year referendum to pull that lever for that president is problematic, because who we should be really concerned about are our local, our state, and officials who have more direct representation and have more direct ways in affecting our lives. Eamon was going to say,
I was just going to talk about the, Trump. I was going back to the Bernie Trump thing, and like the whole thing is painting Hillary as like this establishment candidate, and they're taking the line that they are anti-establishment. That's probably her biggest weakness. Like if it was any other candidate, she'd probably lose the election, I think, based on her establishment ties, which equally pointed at by Bernie and Trump. And, it all kind of leads back, in her case, to the super PACs and the dark money and Citizens United, which I think have to be overturned if you want to create a more equal system for people.
Completely agree. John?
I was going to say, I'm the first one to admit our system is flawed, and the problem is the people who get elected are the ones that make the system. So they have a self-interest in keeping it the way it is. But the difference here is when somebody loses, usually, well, in the past, there's always been people who say fix election. In the past, they've used the legal system to say that things have done to fix the election, stuff like that. Richard Nixon's the best example, of course. But this is the first time that I've seen in such a large election that, we even seen in this room. Bernie Sanders, we know that she stole the election. I've heard people say that here. We know that they've done this or they've done that. But Bernie Sanders has done what almost every other politician has done in the past. When he loses, he either fights it through the courts or he says, I lost. Okay, Donald Trump is the first one that is saying, in a big election like this, if I lost, it's rigged, and I'm not even going to try to prove it. Even Al Gore, when he lost, even with the whole
He never challenged the legitimacy of the system ever.
Exactly.
The recount in Florida was through our systems, through Florida law.
Right.
To make a connection between the two is ludicrous. If anything, after complete corruption and fraud on behalf of George Bush and his cronies in Florida, Gore still said it's better for the good of the United States if I stand away from this and let there be a peaceful transition.
Yeah,
so to make any connection between the two is beyond ludicrous. But I wanted to address, Hillel said something, issues, and the problem is nobody cares. We've gone down to a system of voting, I like her, I want to have a beer with her, I want to have a beer with him. The intelligence of the American electorate has gotten so poor that I like her, I don't like her. I don't like her face. I don't like the fact that she doesn't smile enough. They could give a damn about what her policies are. She just doesn't smile enough, or she smiles too much. Okay? Or he makes funny faces. This is what it's come down to in our election process. People don't care about policies anymore. I don't think they even understand them, or even try to understand. It's become a tribalism of you're on one side or the other. You're on the side of evil, the other side's on the side of good. It's not policy. It's become pure emotion, right? That's how I think you started.
Well, I think to some extent, some reasons for that is the two-party system. It's already binary. There's one that's going to be good and one that's going to be bad in people's lives. But actually, this is a nice transition because I kind of want to move in another direction, but it's connected. What do you guys think? Let's speculate together, and the outside audience, please feel free to add to this. Based on what you know and just the life you've lived, what do you think are some of the reasons why Donald Trump, who I would argue 4 years ago would not have won his party's nomination, what are some of the reasons why he is the Republican Party's nominee?
Because people are upset with the system.
Okay.
So that's
I think that what it comes down to is that people are mad. We just had a black president for 8 years. And then now people see a woman who is going to become president, and they're outraged. So that's, I think, mainly all Trump supporters. And like how Megan said before, it's white upperclassmen.
middle, no, it's like working class,
It's
We're
mostly-
uneducated,
Uneducated,
heterosexual
yeah, I
white
mean,
men.
but
And also in certain
well,
regions of the United States, mostly.
yeah.
Which, you know,
We keep going back to the heterosexual white men, but talking about there's a minority, it's not just them voting for him. So we have to look at who's voting for him. He's getting all these votes. Where is it coming from? I know I asked certain family members, and they told me they're Trump supporters, and I am appalled. I live in New York City. We're all supposed to be liberal in there, but we're not. And they don't want to tell us because, you know, we attack their beliefs, and us liberals have that problem. We say, oh, you're a Trump supporter. Ugh, disgusting. Get out of my face. Which, you know, some of us are guilty of, myself included sometimes. But I think going back to people are tired of the system, and they like him. I've heard this. This is a quote. I like him because he speaks his mind. That's literally the reason. Because there's really no else. They like that he speaks what he thinks because they feel like Hillary is untrustworthy. We keep going back to that as well. I've heard that multiple times. I don't trust her. And, you know, we can get that with the emails, but it's just the sense of who she is, her demeanor. People don't like her.
I'm sorry.
I think he's awoken up a lot of different parts of like what the right political faction could be and is going to be in the future. This new movement of the alt-right has definitely manifested itself in this election to the point where Hillary has to like actually like name it by name. If you look at Alex Jones, Milo Yiannopoulos, you know, these are really what we used to think were like fringe people. Alex Jones being like, you know, this hyper-paranoid conspiracy theorist now feels like he can identify with somebody in an election that is not part of the Illuminati, not part of the New World Order. And Milo Yiannopoulos is a gay man
Greece.
from
Greece.
From Greece and Britain, I believe.
Yeah.
And they view him as somebody that allows for free speech in a way that like you're not going to be punished for not being politically correct, and you're not going to be just ridiculed for having an alternative viewpoint, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I think what Donald Trump has done is allow for this idea of like permitting paranoia, allowing for the expression of these really dark emotions that people have, allowing them to be expressed as legitimate rhetoric, I think is something that he's, you know, really made people realize that this is a part of humanity, this is a part of what people are thinking.
Jonathan.
Well, I was going to say part of this is party politics because a lot of this Donald Trump supporters, Pat Toomey is a good example, the senator from Pennsylvania. He's a misogynist, he's a racist, he's a homophobe, he hates immigrants, he hates everything, but I'm still waiting for a reason to like him and then I'll endorse him. And I'm thinking, what could he possibly be that would give you a reason to counteract all that? But it's because they don't want to they don't want to back Hillary Clinton because she's a Republican, because she's a Democrat. And I think a lot of the Republicans just simply do not, I mean, Hillary Clinton is not a liberal. She's never been a liberal. She's more conservative than most Republicans, as far as I'm concerned. But the problem is, you know, people have decided that she doesn't do it, you know, she's a Democrat, so we don't like him. Bill Clinton is a Democrat, we don't like him. You know, every politician is corrupt. That's how they got to be as high as they got. But, you know, a lot of this is party politics because, you know, he hates women, but I still like him because he's not Hillary.
I think Colin really hit it on the head. I think for the last 8 years, maybe sometime before that, people who had these dark thoughts, as you said, hid in the dark places where they belong. And now they hear other people whispering these horrible things. The KKK. When is the last time you heard about the KKK? Until recently.
Didn't the old red wizard endorse Donald Trump?
Now all of a sudden, this vermin is climbing out of the sewers because they see light. They can actually speak to others now about who they hate, how much they hate the gays, the blacks, the Jews, the Hispanics, and of course the Muslims, and whatever else you want to put in there, and they could have this conversation not in the sewers anymore, but in the bars, outside, and look on the television and see King Rat himself actually able to say these things out loud. How freeing that must be for them. What a wonderful thing that must be for them to come into the light now, out of the sewer, and actually speak in groups of thousands, and not be penalized but be cheered.
I think that's the difference. I think it's getting national attention. Coming from someone who was born in Mississippi, was not raised there, but has all his family from there, people have those conversations in bars. People have those conversations. The KKK is very well alive in northern parts of Mississippi. I just think it's getting national attention now. And I'm not accusing all of the South of being racist and all that. That's not what I mean. But if you look at the electoral map, it does tend to have a certain Donald Trump supporters in certain parts of the region, right? And again, I didn't mean to
No,
I just think that it had been going on, but I think it bubbled to the surface.
I just going back to the rhetoric thing. Donald Trump's campaign just recently had the rhetoric repeal the 19th Amendment, so that women wouldn't be able to vote, because if men were only voting, he would win by a landslide. And that's and then yesterday in the debate, and Delaney would have been so proud of me. Yesterday in the debate, Donald Trump said that the Constitution should not be interpreted, it should be read as is. And then he started talking about the Second Amendment, and then I was like, militia maybe? You're not in a militia, Trump. Wrong. Liar. Because he was like, the Constitution should not be interpreted, it should be read as is. Hillary wants to put someone in the Supreme Court that's going to interpret all this stuff. I'm going to put someone that's going to take it as it is. We should have guns. Guns should be everywhere. But he doesn't know what the Second Amendment actually says. In my common law class, Elaine made us read the Second Amendment and write it down so many times that we knew that it involved militia, because that's a key part of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment involves militia, militia having guns, militia having the right to have guns. We don't have a militia anymore. Yeah.
There are some.
Yeah. But maybe little, but they're fringe. Majority, there's not a big, there's not the same need that there was way back when. And then he wants to repeal the 19th Amendment, and I'm like, so he does want to interpret the Constitution when it benefits him. So, and the 14th Amendment, which was equal protection, he was talking about how he wants to get rid of how all Muslims have to have background checks, whether they're American born or not. If they're a Muslim, then they have to get extreme scrutiny, and how he wants to get rid of all the hombres, all the bad hombres. Can we talk about that for a second? And it was just, yeah, Peter, go ahead.
I just wanted to go back what Lane was saying. I think what makes Donald Trump smart is that he not exposes the vermin, but I think that exposes pieces of ourselves that perhaps we didn't know existed before, or perhaps were waiting to come out. My dad is a Trump supporter, and I'm pretty liberal. I love my dad, but he does have some racist, misogynistic tendencies, and I think that he endorses Trump because, like you said, he likes what he said and he says what he means. And I think that, Trump is so incendiary, and he fires people up, and his rallies are sports events. People get riled up around the cause, and it kind of gives them a way to voice these opinions that they're like, yeah, actually, I would say that if I was provoked in such an incendiary manner. And I think that he is bringing out things in people that, perhaps they wanted to hide or just haven't exposed to themselves. And I think that's what really, gets people rallied around his cause.
Yep. Jeff?
I was so glad you brought up the 19th Amendment, because in about 4 years, it will be 100 years since it became a part of the Constitution. So that means 100 years ago, the only people in this room that could vote would have been men. How much of what we're seeing, at least maybe we're seeing the very beginning of it, is candidate Trump unraveling and unwinding and swirling down the drain as he's realizing that he's about to be beat by a woman?
Oh, I think it kills him. I think it makes his little misogynistic heart beat too fast.
It's a really wonderful piece of justice in a lot of ways, but I think his behavior is going to get a lot worse in the next 2 weeks. and it's all about, forgive me for saying girl, but he's being beaten by a girl.
When he said that he wouldn't accept the outcome of the vote, you know that it's only because it's a woman that wouldn't beat him. Like, because like no other president, I might be wrong, Mr. Rogers, has any other president in history refused to accept the outcome of an election?
The Gore election was a unique situation, but no, I mean.
So Donald Trump would be the first,
Right.
and he'd also be the first to lose to a girl.
Yeah, I think too. Well, I'll wait. I have an thing on.
I just a factoid from the Wall Street Journal NBC poll this afternoon that dealing with issues of concern to women, they still say Hillary is about a 67% to 17% say Trump. So, like her or dislike her, I think the issues that she draws into focus for women will be so much better served than they would be by the alternative.
And I think though this is, I'm not going to go here, maybe people can add to it, but I want to propose something. And you don't have to agree with what I'm saying, it's just something I've been writing about for a while and it interests me. I actually think the kinds of investments that we place on one human being and the kinds of expectations is bad for democracy. Because when that person doesn't look like I do, when that person doesn't espouse everything that I believe in, when that person doesn't do the things that I want them to, when that person doesn't do X, Y, or Z, which is impossible to ask of any human being for one thing, but especially the presidency, because the president is not an all-powerful being. And I think the more and more that we impose and impress, and I know that some of you already heard this, all of our desires, all of our fantasies, all of our hopes and wishes on this one individual, then we're setting ourselves up as the public for failure because we're never going to be satisfied. It's like, that's just bad relationship 101, right? It is. I mean, it's like, I just want to get into an abusive relationship. Like, that's kind of what we're fooling ourselves into. And I think that, to some extent, we're watching and witnessing, like, the progression of this, especially in the 20th century, with the rise of mediums of technology like television that creates an intimacy. It gives opportunity. It brings the president in our house, right? Sorry, I'm ranting. I'll stop for a second. But I do think that these mediums that actually are ways of constructing both the presidency and constructing ideology are at the root, to some extent, of like fooling us into these ways of like feeling that we need to take a step back and maybe go, maybe I shouldn't expect all these things of this one person, since that person is, at least symbolically, supposed to represent us all, which means he or she should actually be able to represent people who disagree widely with his or her opinion, right?
That was my biggest conflict when it was Bernie versus Hillary. You speak with a lot of vitriol for Hillary in a way that I don't think is truly indicative of who she is as a person. Like, I definitely agreed more with Bernie's principles, but when it came down to it, you know, I had to assess whether who could work well across the table, whose policies would be able to be passed through Congress, what type of person would be able to do that, and it was Hillary, like, by a landslide. I would have loved to see Bernie, like, be the Democratic nominee, but I don't think that he would have been digestible for the general election, and I don't think that his policies would have, I think he might have been a lame duck. I think what he did to, like, fire up young people is really good, and like give credence to this new democratic socialism and this new movement that's happening on the left. That's very good, but I don't think that the Bernie or bust ideology that, you know, we can't trust Hillary, like, she's had 30 years of experience showing that she's been able to work across the table, 30 years of experience of being able to do what you were saying, which is like promote progressive policies. I think that, you know, she's imperfect, but she's certainly trustworthy.
But I would just want to add, though, what I'm actually saying, though, is perhaps we need to be demanding more of Congress. Why haven't they done their job for the past, I don't know how many years? I mean, right? Am I, like, why aren't our energies, the kinds of energies that Bernie supporters or Hillary supporters or Trump supporters are expressing, right? Why aren't we doing that for our senators, our Congress people, right? That's kind of where I was. I'm sorry I get passionate about this. It's
No,
like
that's fine.
I'm embodying my research right now.
Going back to what you said about her 30 years of experience, I think she mentioned something about that in the election. I mean, in the debate last night. I was watching. She said, while we were going after so-and-so terrorists, you were doing the Celebrity Apprentice. And I think that embodies the entire situation of what we're looking at. We're looking at a seasoned politician versus somebody who's known for being on national television and quote-unquote a good businessman.
Equivalent to Kim Kardashian running for president. He's a reality star. Would we vote
He's
her?
a reality star who has misogynistic and racist thoughts, looking for hombres in the country to get them out.
I think you make an interesting point. Paul Ryan majorly disagrees with Trump since the start, really. But now he's trying to rile up every local senator, Congress, House election to try to keep the Republican majority. So they're trying to just get enough people to vote Republican and kind of separate them from Trump and another split faction of the Republican Party.
James was trying to say something.
I think that it's, there are obviously quite a few Bernie supporters in the room. And as a Bernie supporter, I kind of feel as though, yes, we need to start focusing on, down ballot candidates, and we need to start building that revolution that Bernie, brought to fruition during the primaries. We need to, take it from here as the people and start to vote people into smaller positions that can help us. And, the whole concept of Bernie's revolution, I firmly believe that he has ignited that passion in young people enough that we're going to carry that out.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I was going to say, to your point about people forgetting that Congress is actually there, is the fact that Bernie Sanders could run as an outsider, even though he has more experience in the federal government than Hillary Clinton does. But he's running as an outsider.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
he's been in Congress for 30 years? Something like that?
Peter.
I was just going back to what you said about people not believing in the person. I think that the thing with this election is that the people who were voting for it become completely constructed images, and that Hillary's name as a brand stands for 30 years of experience doing great things, or this corrupt crooked woman. And Donald Trump stands for this guy who's really going to get stuff done, or he's a racist or whatever. And I think that we believe in their images, and that why we get disappointed with people is that they don't deliver on their images, because their images actually aren't real. The people that are behind them are real and authentic and have thoughts and feelings and ways of going about things, but their image isn't always what's translatable into the real world. And I think that's just human nature. We all construct an image, but I think what the phoniness of that is that we can't live up to it, and I think that is problematic in that sense.
We have time for me to make a point.
One more?
Okay. So going off what Peter was saying, I think that this idea that we've brought the candidates into our living room, we think that we understand them, is very detrimental to politics, and it's really tricky waters to navigate through. And what people are saying about Trump, oh, he speaks his mind, people are always as soon as he speaks his mind, the first people will be oh, he doesn't mean that. And that's really hard. It's really hard because we don't know what he means, or what any candidate means when they speak out of the debate.
Well, we have to wrap up. I first want to thank all the students that participated in this roundtable. It is so encouraging, your passion and your interest in being involved. I really mean that. Actually, getting a little choked up. No, it means it matters, y'all. Your participation matters. You guys do have a voice. Don't let people tell you millennials are this and millennials that or that. Don't let them construct an image of who you are. You construct the image of who you are. And I just want to lastly end, unfortunately, we weren't able to actually have a more balanced and nuanced conversation represented on the right to some extent, because the person embodying those things is much easier to talk about, because he's not actually doing a good job of that. So I hope we return to conversations like this where we can have debates from both the left, the center, the right in the future. So.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
All right.